Hey guys, Sherm here, and today I'm going to be showing you the Toroidion 1MW at Golden Max in Asphalt 9 multiplayer. As I do not own this car, and forgot to record it when it was available for free try at Golden Max previously, Finn of the UERK team has given me these races. Please consider subscribing if you have not already, and be sure to check out my Purple Team Discord and my Furum Clips channel. You'll find the links to those down in the description, and I hope you enjoy these very intense races. I believe the Toroidion 1MW is one of the most underrated cars in the entire game for a variety of reasons, if not the most underrated. Due to having a somewhat difficult special event, not a whole lot of people managed to get it, much less at Gold Max. After my last stream, I put out a request to see if anybody had this car at Golden Max, because so far I hadn't really found anyone. So a big thank you to everyone who sent me names of people who had this car, and of course a shout out to Finn for being the one that I eventually decided on. As you can probably tell already, he is very skilled at driving this car, which is not an easy feat, as I will explain a bit later. He's going up some of the most overpowered cars in the entire game in this video, including a Jesko in this race, we've got two Ataras, we've got Shirens, we've got all sorts of cars going against the Toroidion later in this video, and you do not want to miss any of the races. In just this first race, Finn not only beats a Jesko by a frame, but also beats 4 Bugatti Shirens and 1 Tryon Nemesis. And in this next race on Caribbean, we have a Rimac Nevera, a Tryon Nemesis, a Bugatti Chiron, a Regera, and a Tuatara as well. I feel like I should probably explain now just why this car is underrated in my opinion, and why it's actually one of the most powerful cars in the whole game if you can drive it properly. So if you watched my max test drive video about this car when it first came out, you'll know that it is the 4th fastest car in the game, only behind the Tuatara, Jesko, and Venom. Yeah, it is the 4th fastest, only behind the literal kings. It knocked out the Regera from 4th place, and its stats are actually better than the Regeras in every single stat. This is a pretty big deal. The Regera obviously is a very good car, but it never really was at king status because its drifting just wasn't all that great, its acceleration wasn't either, and its nitro kind of left a lot to be desired. Obviously its speed was really good, and that allowed it to pull out very fast times on tracks like the Himalayas or any more really speed-oriented track. But on anything with lots of twists and turns, the Regera just was not going to do all that great, because it just lost too much speed around the turns, couldn't get back up to speed around them, and thus the Chiron and the Voidwalkers were better than the Regera on pretty much every track. Enter the Toroidion. RedRacerX did a couple of tests between the Toroidion and the Chiron and the Bugatti Voidwalkers, and the Toroidion beat both of those cars on 1,000 Minarets, I believe it was, and one of the Caribbean tracks as well. Now, you might not be surprised about 1,000 Minarets because that is generally considered to be a more top speed-oriented track, and since this car is faster than the Chiron and the Voidwalkers, it may not be that much of a surprise that it beat it there. But beating those cars on the Caribbean, and not by an extremely close margin either, definitely surprised me, and I think it's worth taking a look as to how this happened. So the Toroidion at the beginning always will fall behind pretty much, because its acceleration is not that great, and Chirons and stuff will get ahead, because you know the Chiron and the Voidwalkers have pretty good acceleration for Class S overall. They're one of the better ones in the class. But the Toroidion's speed is what really makes the difference, and its ability to keep that speed too. This is very important. The Toroidion seems to stay behind for the first 50% of the track or so, but then whenever you get a long straight section, the speed makes the difference and the Toroidion is able to catch up. Now, other cars can do this too, like the Regera for example, but what makes the Toroidion different is that its drifting speed is actually very similar to that of the Bugatti Chiron for example, and thus about the same as the Voidwalkers too, so unlike the Regera, the Toroidion doesn't really lose any more speed around turns than a lot of these other cars. Now, after turns also is pretty important in getting up to your top speed. If you can get Shockwave, you can't really get this car up to its top speed with the Shockwave since its nitro is somewhat limited. However, in this video, you can see this was recorded during Slipstream season, Go Slipstream to be exact, which is where this car will do somewhat better, because the Slipstream somewhat negates the mediocre nitro of this car, allowing it to do pretty well, and obviously when you're racing in high-end S-Class cars, ghosting is extremely nice because the races are often very tight, and not having knockdowns or anything like that makes for much better races, and it's a lot more based on skill this way, at least in my opinion. In that race, Finn beat another member of UERK who was in the BXR Bailey Blade GT1, which was not so great on its release, but after its drifting got improved. I think its handling stat may have been increased, don't remember exactly, but anyway, it's better than it used to be by a long shot, and at this point is also very competitive against cars like the Bugatti Chiron. I know that a few members of my Discord are very happy about that. In this race, we have got a Venom, as well as a Tuatara, a Chiron, and some other high-end S-Class cars. When you're up as close to 2,000 rating as Finn is, that's pretty much all you're going to ever see, because, well, that's what it takes to get here, and nobody wants to risk losing a bunch of points in an A-Class car or a slower S-Class car, for example, when you pretty much just gain 1 point or so if you come in first, if you're up like 1980, 1990 rating like Finn is, but then you go down many if you don't come in first. Or I'm sure with second you might be okay sometimes if you have a lot of people in the race, but it just becomes really easy to lose points and really hard to gain points when you're up so high. And we also had Racer Best in this race too, almost passing Finn at the last second, not quite though, and Finn again takes the victory. It's really cool to see such a big variety of cars being used up toward the top here. You might expect that you'd only see the kings like the Venom, the Tuatara, and the Jesko, but no, we've got the Navara, and the Tryon, and the Chiron, and the Toroidion here, which pretty much is the only one you'll see, although I do know Racer Best has it too. So you might be thinking, if the Toroidion gets better times than the Chiron and the Voidwalkers, and the Voidwalkers was generally considered to be the 4th best car in the game, or pretty close to it for example, is the Toroidion now the 4th best car in the game? I wouldn't really say that necessarily. In the right hands, it absolutely could be. It is more stable than cars like the Chiron. However, if you don't have slipstream, it might not be quite as easy to get consistent wins in multiplayer as something like the Chiron, for example, due to the Toroidion's slow acceleration, and if you get short tracks and stuff, you might not be able to catch up in time, if especially you do not have slipstream. So I would say that where this car ranks overall in Class S does depend quite a bit on where you are using it. I would say that it is a better event car than a multiplayer car, as cars with high top speed and mediocre other stats generally tend to be, because these kinds of cars typically don't get as reliably good times as other cars that are easier to drive but might be slightly slower, but if you get a really good run, then they will usually be faster. In multiplayer, of course, this doesn't work. If you wreck, well, you can't just play the race over and over again, you can't just restart it until you get a good time. You gotta keep going and pushing, and what really matters is how reliable is your car in not only being able to catch up, but avoiding wrecks to begin with. And the Toroidion, even though it is relatively stable, isn't quite as forgiving as some of the other S-Class cars. But if you get a good kind of multiplayer season for it, such as specifically a Slipstream and Ghost season like the one Finn is playing in right now, it can definitely do very well, because a lot of the aspects of this car that aren't so great are negated, such as the poor acceleration and nitro due to being able to slipstream behind the cars to get ahead in the beginning. Then you can catch up to them. If they're slower, you can pass them and then stay ahead for pretty much the rest of the race. That's basically what happened in this race and in most of the other races in the video. The Chirons and other cars with better acceleration would get ahead in the beginning. Finn would just ride behind for a little while and then slipstream behind them, shockwave up to his top speed, and pass them at some point during the race. Even in that race on New York, coming back from a wreck to first place. And now in this final race, we are on Auckland. Finn's main competitor in this race is Rev Kraken in his Venom. Now, the fact that the Toroidion can do good on Auckland, I think is also somewhat of a testament to how good it really is. Which brings me to my general review about this car. It is absolutely one of the best cars in the game, not as good as the Tuatara, Venom, or Jesko, but better than the Bugatti Chiron, the Voidwalkers, etc. on many tracks. Although it might not be as reliable as those, if you put it in the right hands and get the right kind of season, it can do wonders. Thank you to Finn for these races. Thank you to you all for watching. Please like the video if you've enjoyed and consider subscribing for more Asphalt and other games content. I will see you in my next video. Goodbye!